All right, what's going on, everybody? So today is a very exciting day. I got pretty much everything ready to go for this Legacy GT rebuild we're doing. I got my short block back from the machine shop. He went over, it was quite a bit of work it needed. The cylinder walls were pretty much screwed. So what we ended up doing was boring these out 20 over. And he actually has this piston supplier with these guys. These are 20 over, basically like stock equivalent pistons. I forget the brand. I think, yeah, they're Top Line Harleth Johnson pistons. He really recommends them. They're coated, so they're. I don't think OEM pistons have this side skirt coating, but other than that, they're pretty much just like a factory piston, but they're bored 20 over to fit our freshly machined cylinder walls. So we did, we decked it, we bored it 20 over. He did a line hone. He got it fitted with all ACL bearings, got everything measured for our brand new crankshaft. So this is the nitrated or nitrided STI crankshaft. This is pretty much all they supply now from the dealer. If you go and buy a 2.5 crankshaft, this is what they supply now. This was only in cars, I think 2008 and up. But now, I mean, whenever you buy a replacement crank, they just give you the upgraded one for the same price. So I got my new set of, well, new to me set of rods. These are actually out of an 07 STI with like 25,000 miles. They've been weight matched, so down to the thousandths of a gram, I think. So, yep. So they all weigh exactly the same. All the pistons are all weight matched. The crankshaft is obviously brand new, so that's balanced. So it's essentially everything's balanced and ready to go. I didn't obviously have it balanced like with a flywheel or, you know, do an actual balance job on it, but this is pretty much as close as you're going to get if you have matching pistons and rods and then a brand new crank. You're pretty much good. So this is how you get it back from the machine shop. It's torqued together because obviously he has to torque it together with the bearings in it to measure it with a borescope or a bore gauge to get the clearances. So we're just right on the sort of the tighter side of spec. I think it was like 8 to 10 thousandths on pretty much all of them. Our tightest one is the thrust bearing out here in the number 5 spot right there. So but yeah, we got tons of parts. We got my ACL rod bearings, got those measured. This one's already in there, ready to go. So I got my new piston rings that go with those. So that's the only thing he hasn't done is I have to gap these piston rings myself. So we're going to be going over that. Over here, we got the fresh cylinder heads, all completely rebuilt, new valves. So I think I went over this stuff in another video already. But if you guys don't know, the B25 STI heads, we had to replace all the valve guides, all the exhaust valves. He set all my valve lash because these are solid bucket lifters. So they're essentially completely rebuilt, surfaced, pressure tested, 100% ready to go. I got a new oil pickup tube. Always a good idea when you blow up a motor because you never know what's in there, and they break anyway. So I ordered all the OEM case O-rings. I got my front main seal. I actually found this stuff on Amazon. These are all the case washers because when you rebuild these, you need to replace these washers. These go inside the case bolts that go inside the coolant jackets, so you have to replace those. I got an upgraded OEM 11 millimeter oil pump, so a little bit more oil volume. Just a good upgrade for these. The stock one is a 10 mil. This is just an 11 mil, so I think it's like 30% more volume or something I read. It's a little bit more volume on the pump, help keep the motor alive. Yeah, I think I'm still missing a water pump, but we have everything to put the short block together. I also do not have head gaskets yet because we need to measure piston protrusion to know what head gasket we can run. If I can use an OEM original gasket, that'd be awesome. But this motor has been decked, so we don't know yet. So this video is just going to be putting the short block together. I think I've done a bunch of these already, usually with a time lapse. I think this time I'm just going to assemble the whole thing with like a head cam so you guys can just see what I see while I put this thing together. Alright, so I'm just setting up the oil rings, not the oil scraper rings, but the retention rings. So out of the box, these are pretty much already set, but I always just like to check them. So you just sort of pop the two outer rings, or one at a time, and the bore, I already put these in, but I think the spec was between 020 and 050, so pretty wide range of spec, but just kind of double check that it's somewhere in the middle of spec, and you can actually Google and look up the actual OEM guide and the you know, what the specs are supposed to be. The main thing is that the one of the rings has this little prong that goes in a little groove right there. That's the top ring. The bottom ring doesn't have that, so it just goes in there, and you move on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to start with the second rings. Since all the oil rings out of the box were perfect, you don't have to mess with any of those. So we're just going to work our way down the piston. So that's the first one. So I measured number 2, and we were sitting at about 043 millimeters, which is right in the middle of spec. I think the spec was, I think it said it was 037 to 052. So 043 is kind of right in the middle. So I'm going to measure all of them and kind of see what my biggest one is, because I want them all to match. So hopefully 043 is my biggest one. I just checked out this one, and this one's only at this 033 millimeter one barely fits in here, so it's like pretty tight, so I'm guessing it's about 032 millimeter, so I'm going to need to open that one up. So all I'm going to do that is just put a file in my vise over here, put it in that, and then I'll just kind of do it by hand. You can do it with a grinder if you're feeling bold, but I like to go real slow, take off as little material as possible, then just get that clearance exactly how I want it. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about ring gaps. I'm not following the factory specs on these ring gaps. I just got done filing my second ring. So the second ring, I'm in the spec. I did, well, it's right at the top of spec. So the spec's basically at 0.020 is kind of the spec. So I set 1 and 2 to 0.021. You can't read my handwriting, but it's all scribbly. But number 4 and number 3, I open up a little bit more to 0.22. That's in inches. So that will just give it a little bit extra expansion. These, like the 255s and the 257s on the top ring, is really, really tight. I think the spec was 0.0079 to 0.0098, I think it was. So like half the gap of the bottom ring. So I'm going to set both of them, the top and the second ring, to about 0.021. That's kind of my goal. Just open up that top ring, give it a little bit more room to expand, because as you guys probably know, 255s and 257s are known for breaking that ringland. The infamous ringland is because those ring gaps are way too tight for the kind of power that these engines make. The ends butt together, and it ends up cracking the ringland because the ring has nowhere to go once it expands. So by opening this up, it shouldn't consume oil or anything. We use the same ring gaps on his. There's no issues, and all the EJs we build, we usually go around this ring gap. So gives it a little bit of safety, not too much oil consumption, so it should be good. So I'm just gonna go through the rest of these. I'm just kind of putting them on here to hold them. So I mark my pistons. You put them in the bore in the correct cylinder because you want to measure the ring for the cylinder it's in. And once I'm done, the little taper on the bottom of the ring goes downward because it's an oil scraper ring essentially. It scrapes the oil down off the bottom, so you'll see that little groove. It's way too small to see, but the little groove scrapes the oil as it goes down. So next is the top ring, same thing. No real need to show me sitting here with a file, filing a ring. So, all right, so these are my final numbers for the ring gaps. Took a little bit too much off of number 3, but it's still good. I'll just go ahead and use it. It's not that much off, so I just put the part number for the pistons right here in case anybody wants them, but it's good to know. So next, get my assembly lube out. I got all the rings on the pistons numbered, so those are ready to go. I'm probably going to take those off and clean them one more time, but now we move on to the rods. So I need to take these caps off and start putting the rods on the crank here. So this is what I use. Use this engine lube, this stuff here. So I'll put some on, like this. Oh wow. There we go. Okay, so put some of this engine lube on the lobes, get everything nice and lubed up. Put the bearings in the rods here. Once I take the caps off, I'll show you that. And we'll just start lining them up, and then we'll torque them all down. All right, I just put the rods on the crank. They're not torqued or anything. I just put the bearings in there and put the rods on. When you're doing this yourself, this is always a trick to remember. Fuji logo goes forward. This is the front. This is the snout of the crank. Obviously, remain seal goes back there. It's flat. That's where your flywheel goes. So you need to make sure all your rods have that logo pointing forward. And you're good to go. Okay, so I got my rods all torqued down. The factory spec on these OEM bolts is 33 foot-pounds. So I just kind of snug them up evenly and then torque them one by one. Getting the block all ready. I got my new O-rings put in here. Put some lube on all the bearings. Cleaning the surface here so I can put my OEM Fuji bond versus a 3 bond is what they call it now. Put that RTV on here. You don't need to do too much because it's a machine surface, so it's just going to squeeze out. I'm going to pop the rear main on the back of the crank because I set it down in there. Just kind of slowly get it ready. But yeah, I also need to swap over the washers because I got all new washers for all the bolts because you got to replace these. These are the ones that go in the coolant jackets. They got a little seal on them. So I'm going to get all the bolts ready so when I put the case halves together, I can just cinch them down and let the RTV dry. Okay, so a little tip on pistons. The little dot or the marker here always points towards the front of the engine. So that would be the snout of the crankshaft. So all the pistons point forward. You want your rings to line up in the top corners. Usually you go about here and about here for the first two main, top rings. So I'm going to set this top one right there. The second one, it's kind of rotate a little bit, but about there. And then the other rings, the top one, the oil rings have a groove that it rests in. I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, right there. So that one has a little notch. And then you just want the bottom one to be on the other side, like opposite of it. And then you don't want the spring, its gap, to be in the same place. So you need them all to be in different places. Usually I put one over there, that one there, that one there, and you're good. And so you get a little compression or a piston compressor thing. This one is a piece of shit, and but it works. It's multiple sizes and stuff. You can buy nice little sleeve ones that are made for your specific piston size. Then you just kind of put it in the thing and tap it in, and you're good to go. Okay, so clean your cylinder walls one final time. Get some engine oil and lube up get all over the cylinder walls. You want the all to be highly lubricated. You don't want to use anything but engine oil because you do want these rings to seat, so you can't use like assembly lube or anything like that. But get it lined up, a little dot going forward. Make sure it doesn't fall out because you don't want to hammer on it too hard. If it stops, take it back out and try again because these rings are pretty fragile. So if it gets caught on the edge and you're just whack on it, it's gonna break the ring, and you got to get new rings. It could possibly damage the cylinder, so just be careful. All right, just tapped it in there, push it down, and then try to line it up here. And you can reach in here and kind of line up your connecting rod. Let's see. Kind of line that up there. And then you just slide in your wrist pin. See if it'll let me do it. Maybe. I'll not do it on camera. Kind of wiggle it back and forth to get the piston centered. It's just barely misaligned. I just need to tap it a little bit. But it should slide in pretty easily. I felt it go partially into the rod. Alright, give it a little tap, and it just slid right in with my finger after that. You just kind of have to like move the piston side to side to make sure it's fully lined up. If it doesn't slide in easily, you may have an issue with the rod. It should slide in easily. The first set of rods I got for this motor were bent, and so the wrist pin didn't really fit. So it should just go in there pretty easily. Once it's in there like that, you need to put your little C-clip, this little guy, it's needle nose. Very careful not to drop it and get it into the groove there. And there you go, and that's it, you're done. Alright, just like that, we have a short block. So I just went ahead and threw it up on the engine stand right here. Put the block plugs in. I still haven't got an oil separator plate. I'm considering reusing the old one, but there's also an updated part number from Subaru that's a lot nicer. Doesn't leak as much, so I might grab one of those. But that's pretty much the short block assembly. So now it's basically just bolting stuff back on. So I was working on cleaning up my brand new 11 mil oil pump. So that's a good upgrade for these. The stock one is a 10 mil. But the 11 mil from the STI is a good upgrade. Should bump the oil pressure a little bit. I'm just trying to do everything I can to kind of help make this engine live a little bit longer. So like I got the nitrated crankshaft, good ACL bearings, nice new pistons that are bored over a little bit. So the piston to wall clearance is perfect. So it's looking really good. This motor should last a long time in this car. That's the whole idea. It's going back as stock as possible, but with little minor upgrades. So it's probably going to be the next time you see this thing. I'll be assembling the rest of the motor and trying to get it back in the car. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions or whatever, post it in the comments. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out. And yeah, we'll see you next time.